What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Mock Draft Guy YouTube channel. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my preseason rankings for the top 20 tight ends in the 2025 NFL draft class. Now, this video might be just a tad shorter than some of my other top 20 rankings because unlike the quarterbacks, where there's no real clear-cut number one, but it's a really solid class of just a bunch of depth from top to bottom. Then the running backs is super stacked. The safeties are super stacked. The tight end position is really top heavy in my opinion. You got maybe 5 or 6 guys that I think could be, day one impact players. And then the rest of the top 20 leaves a lot to be desired. So it's not as deep of a positional group as I once thought. Before evaluations, I had about 35 guys on my list. I said, wow, this is really exciting. There's a lot of guys that I can't wait to look at. And I wound up being just a tad disappointed, I guess I would say, but there's still some unbelievable talent at the top of this board. So we're going to take a look at it. And before we get into this top 20, if you guys love, rankings or looking at big boards and all that kind of stuff, don't forget to subscribe to the Dashing Draft Guys Patreon. It will be linked in the pinned comment below. For $5 a month, you get my entire board for every single positional group for the 2025 draft that is ever changing. Same thing with JWAC Gridiron. We share it, so you're getting 2 different draft boards of every single different positional group. It's a ton of work, and the beauty of it is after the season's done, after the draft rolls around, you could always cancel, no hard feelings, but we'll be back the next year after that. So definitely check that out if you can. It'll be in the pinned comment below. Let's get into it here. We're going to start at obviously number 20, and we have Oscar Cardinus here from the University of Texas, San Antonio. So it's funny, there was actually a commenter all last year. I don't remember his name. I wish I did. Hopefully he comments on this video. He kept saying, you got to look at Oscar Cardinus, Oscar Cardinus the entire time. And I kept saying, I was like, I don't know. I don't see him on this board in 2024. So 2025, he is on this board. And, I do love his frame, massive frame, 6'4", 265 pounds. He does a good job of using that frame to box out defenders against man coverage. So, he's just he's like the immovable object. On those quick hitters, those hitch routes, he is just completely immovable if he gets the leverage. So he does really well there. He does a good job of finding the soft spot in zone coverages and sitting in it. And he offers some pretty decent promise as an inline pass blocker. So the cons on his side, first off, is age. He'll be around 24 years old. He's a 5th-year senior at the time that the NFL draft will roll by. He doesn't offer too much in the receiving game. I believe his career high in receiving yards is 281. I believe that was last year. Isn't quick enough to get to the second level and continue his blocks in the run game. So he's really just kind of a one assignment or a guy that'll hold his block for a couple seconds. He really can't follow the defender up the field. He can't keep the block engaged. And overall, just isn't an impressive athlete for the most part. He's not someone that's going to come in there and blow you away athletically, but he's a super solid prospect. Don't get me wrong. He's someone that I think is probably going to be there after the draft. He's going to be an undrafted free agent, but he's someone that offers a lot of size, and he could be a very useful third tight end in those, bunched tight end formations. So someone to look out for this year. We're going to move on to number 19, and it is C.J. Depri from Alabama. So love the name, by the way. That's really one of the first pros that I have about him. He excels as a blocker. I would say that he's better served as a purely blocking tight end, but as a pass catcher, he's very reliable. He has very solid hands, and he's a good safety blanket for the quarterback. He seals the edge nicely as a run blocker. There's a lot to like about his game, and he's young. He just turned 21 as well, so someone that hopefully, as a receiver, can kind of keep growing as this year goes on. He's going to have an expanded role this year as Amari Black is now on Texas, so he transferred from Alabama. So CJ Depri is going to have more of an expanded role this upcoming year. But on the con side, he's virtually a non-factor in the passing attack. He's super solid when the ball is thrown his way, but it's not often. So I'm excited to see if he could develop that side of his game with more opportunities this year. He gets bodied by edge rushers as a pass blocker. He's a way better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And then kind of the same thing with Cardinus. He's just not there athletically at all. So, he's going to be a solid traditional tight end type of player. I think, again, he's more a number 3 tight end on an offense, someone that's going to leak out, on 3rd and long, and he's going to, catch a pass that's unexpected, but he's primarily in there to block, if you will. So like a Johnny Munt type of player from Minnesota, if you guys get that reference at all. But again, another guy that I think will be there as an undrafted free agent. Just don't see it unless he develops more as a pass catcher. I just can't really see it. At number 18, we have Benjamin Urosek here, a Stanford transfer to Georgia. So Georgia have 2 top 20 tight ends, in my opinion, on their team. They have Benjamin Urosek here, and they have Oscar Delp. We'll get to him in a little bit, but Urosek is someone that a lot of people are super high on going into this season, and rightfully so. But he does come with a little bit of an injury history, so that's something to watch for sure. But he's a good athlete for the position, has pretty decent speed. He's got a good burst off the line of scrimmage, and he's quick in short areas. He's got good blocking ability in both run blocking and pass blocking. He's got a good, strong, wide base, and he does a decent job at controlling the entire rep. So on the contrary of Cardinus or Depri, where they're kind of a one-level blocker and then they kind of get bodied as you go up the field to the 2nd and 3rd level of the defense, Urosek is someone that is going to be able to control the rep all the way until the whistle. So that's something that is really positive. He also comes with a ton of experience from a good program. Stanford, hasn't had the same success the past 5 years as they had previously, but again, a super solid program in their own right. On the con side, he does not separate well, and he performs mostly against poor competition. So against better competition, he doesn't really perform. That'll be something that I'm looking to see change this year with Georgia. I mean, basically almost everyone is inferior competition to Georgia, so you can't really base it off of that. And like I said before, he does have injury history. He's a little tight and he's a little bit clunky in his movements. He's not as loose and fluid as you would want from a tight end that actually has pretty decent speed. So if he was just a touch more fluid as an athlete, I think he'd be a real problem in the pass game, but I just don't see it right now. Hopefully with Oscar Delp on the other side of the formation and just the overall amazingness of the Georgia program itself, he could break out in a big way going into his age 23 season. I believe that this is also his 5th year in college as well, so that's something to look out for. Moving on to number 17, we have Brandt Kthy from Utah, one of my favorite names to say on this entire list. So Kthy is someone that I'll be honest with you, I like a lot as a receiver, because if you watch the tape so he actually stood out to me when I was watching Cameron Rising's tape. He stood out to me a lot as someone that was a safety blanket that was actually really, really quick off the line of scrimmage and just got into open space quite well. And he was able to separate on those horizontal running routes as well. But Kthy is someone that comes with a huge injury history. I believe he missed the entire 2023 season, and he only played 5 games in 2022. So, him and Cam Rising have a good history together because they're also severely injured together. Kthy is also someone that's going to be 25 around the time of the NFL draft. So that is also a strike against him. And the fact that he has a big time injury history, and the fact that he's 6'2", 236 pounds for the tight end position, not necessarily fast enough to be that big slot type of guy that we are seeing more in the NFL now today. But I like Kthy as someone that could be, an undrafted free agent or a super late day 3 prospect that could make a name for himself over time. But I didn't really do too much of an evaluation on him because his tape is so old. I'd love to see how he moves in 2024 with all this injury history under his belt. So he's someone that's a little bit under construction for me in terms of an actual evaluation, but I do like him and do think with a good season, he could slide into that day 3 conversation. So we're going to move on to number 16 here, and we have Jaylen Conway from Texas Tech, or transferred to Texas Tech. So one thing I love about Conyers here is he's got some unreal size for the position. 6'4", 265 pounds, but if you could see from the picture here on the screen, he does not look like he's 265 pounds. So he's very, very muscle-toned, a very strong player. He's got that daunting type of frame, and he's a wrecking ball in the open field. So That's what I love about his game. He just brings so much as a receiver. He can't be brought down by one player. He turns up the field and is a surprising yards after the catch threat. He's got great contact balance, and he's a reliable target for any quarterback because he does not drop the football. So those are some of the big time pros here, but as you could tell, I didn't mention anything about blocking, and being a tight end, even in today's NFL and today's football, you do have to do some sort of blocking. He's a virtual non-factor as a blocker, and he's just one speed as a runner too. What you see off the line of scrimmage is what you're going to get in the open field. He has one gear. He can't really kick it into another gear after he gets the ball in his hand. So that's something that, you know, I don't like to see. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more quickness. Maybe I'm scrutinizing just a little bit too much because it is the tight end position. And like I said, just as much of a non-factor as he is as a blocker, he's a real liability as a run blocker. I mean, granted, they don't ask him to do too much, but now he's going to be at Texas Tech. They have Taj Brooks. They have a legitimate rushing attack. He's going to be asked to block a little bit more. Hopefully he was able to improve on that part of his game in the offseason. But Conyers is someone I like that can improve his stock. He's also 23 years old. This is one thing I noticed from this positional group is a lot of the top prospects are a lot older. So you're looking at Conyers as well. That's going to be 24 years old around the time of the NFL draft. So another thing to look out for there with him. So we're moving on to number 15. It's Gavin Bartholomew from Pitt. I love that Pitt logo. I don't know about you guys, but the actual Panther itself is really, really cool. I absolutely love that logo. Hopefully that is their new primary. I don't think it is. I still think the traditional Pitt in the cursive is their primary logo, but this secondary logo is super cool. But one thing that stands out about Bartholomew here is he is a willing and able blocker. That's for sure. He's got a great frame, 6'5", 250 pounds, and an athletic 6'5", 250 pounds. I'll be that. Will be a 4-year starter and just 22 years old at the time of the NFL draft. So he's got plenty of experience, a 4-year starter from a true freshman to a true senior. He is going to be 22 years old at the time of the draft. So that's something that we haven't seen from some of these lower prospects here. A lot of guys have been older, so that's also encouraging. An impressive receiver up the seam. He possesses some surprising athleticism and quickness off the line of scrimmage. So that's something to see there. Also, not used too much in the passing game, but I was pretty impressed for what I saw. So on the con side, he seems more of a block first type of player, which is a dying breed in the NFL, unfortunately. Had some drop problems last season, isn't as fluid as a receiver as you would like to see. He is quick up the seam, but he does struggle. He bobbles a lot of passes as well. He has a tough time separating against more athletic linebackers and safeties. And he's just kind of a solid player for me that doesn't do anything spectacular. So there's parts of his game that I like, parts of his game that I don't like, but he's not a liability in any way, shape, or form, but he's not outstanding at anything. So he's like a perfect middle ground for me, if that makes any sense. But again, I love the fact that he comes with a ton of experience. He's only going to be 22 at the time of the draft. So there's a lot to like from Bartholomew's game. Moving on to number 14, we have Caden Purinton here for Ole Miss. Again, another one of my favorite names to say in the entire draft class. So one thing that unfortunately stands out about Purinton is his age. Again, another guy that's going to be 25 years old around the time of the NFL draft. Great size, 6'5", 260 pounds. I believe Ole Miss played in the Peach Bowl last year, and he was the Peach Bowl MVP. I believe he had like 10 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So again, someone that if you look at his numbers, you would think a tight end performing like that in the Peach Bowl, and technically not a playoff game, but a bowl game, you would think, wow, this guy's got 1,000 receiving yards. I believe he's topped out at 600 as his career high. So hopefully that was a breakout performance for him. We could see a lot more from him this upcoming season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But Purinton is one of, if not the best overall blockers in the entire class, an 80.3 overall blocking grade in 10 games in 2023. He's a big, solid target in the middle of the field, surprising quickness in the open space with the ball in his hands. He's extremely physical off the line of scrimmage, and at the catch point, he fights for every catch in traffic. He's going to give it his all every single time the ball is thrown his way. I absolutely love that. He's not the best athlete overall. He's probably better served as a secondary tight end. He's not someone that I am convinced can handle the load as a primary tight end, especially with his injury history and his age at this point. He's a good pass blocker, but leaves a lot to be desired as a run blocker, and he needs to improve that overall ability. And like I said, that injury history, and he's already 24 years old. I think that Priestcorn is someone that, if he was a little bit younger, didn't have that injury history, could be in that solid day 2 discussion. But for right now, he's going to be someone for me that's going to be a mid to late day 3 prospect, especially with that age, unfortunately. So, like I said, I would just love to see an improvement, maybe stay healthy. I'd love to see an improvement as a run blocker and a little bit more consistency as an overall receiver. Moving on to number 13, we have Mason Taylor. This is the son of NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. I did not know that until, doing a tad more research. So that was certainly interesting. Taylor is huge. 6'6", 260 pounds. Just by looking at him in the picture, he is a monster target. He's a huge target in the middle of the field. Soft, natural hands. He's a hands catcher of the football, something that I love. I cannot stand when big targets, especially tight ends, catch with their body. It's just so unnatural to me. Get those hands out in front of your face. Make sure you're looking that ball all the way into your hands. He's got a high football IQ. He's just an overall smart player. Good athleticism with alignment versatility. He can line up in the slot and has for LSU. I'd love to see a little bit more from him this year. Now last year it was tough. You had amazing wide receivers on the outside, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors. Now that, even though LSU still has some great receivers, CJ Daniels, as well as someone that transferred from Liberty, so I'm looking forward to him. We'll get to him in a later video. Taylor, I feel like, can take that next step as another weapon for Garrett Nussmeier this year, so I'm excited to see what he can do there. On the con side, he's not very fast, and he doesn't separate at an elite level. He's not a good run blocker and doesn't keep his feet moving after initial contact. He kind of drags. So when you engage with an assignment and you don't move your feet, that's how you get holding penalties. That's how you get illegal hands to the face penalties, because you kind of have to just pull. If you're not moving your feet, sliding your feet with your assignment, you're pulling essentially. And then I just want to see a little bit more consistency in 2024. Like I said, I think that he can get there because of the fact that he now has a little bit of an expanded role. So I'm going to be very excited to see what we can see out of Mason Taylor in 2024 for the LSU Tigers. Now, moving on to number 12, we have Amari Black here. And I love that picture, by the way. That is awesome. One of the more underrated transfers for Texas this year. They did get a couple of Alabama Crimson Tide. Black is one, Isaiah Bond is another. So guys that I think are going to be real factors in this quick tempo, high motion offense for Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. So right away, uber athletic player, just sensational athleticism, 20 years old. He's got tremendous fluidity and speed up the seam. He's great size-strength combination. So just by looking at him, he looks more like a wide receiver, and that kind of holds true in his body type. 6'4", 231 pounds. So really, really on the light side for a tight end prospect. Love to see him bulk up to that 240, 245, be one of those big slots like we see Kyle Pitts play. So that remains to be seen, but good versatility. He could be used all over the place. He could be used as an H-back as well in the backfield. Showed some solid promise as a blocker, especially at the second and third levels of the defense. So this is someone that can get off and keep going with the running back or the wide receiver down the field. That's something that's really promising about Black's game. On the con side, would love to see him fill out his frame, like I mentioned. Underutilized at Bama. I want to see some more consistency and more production at Texas. And I do believe that we will see that. He is, I don't want to say he's a carbon copy of Jatavion Sanders, but he's more of that type of tight end where we saw Sanders be more of a big slot. I feel like Black is kind of the same, except he comes with a bit more blocking upside. And then a little bit of concentration drops from Black last year when he did get the opportunity to catch the football. That's something, like I said, concentration is something that could easily be, just more focus, you'll catch the football more. So I'm not even really worried about that. I'm just kind of nitpicking at that point. But I'm excited to see what Black could do with his athleticism in Steve Sarkisian's offense in 2024-25. Moving on to number 11 and just missing out on my top 10 here, we have RJ Maryland from SMU. Again, another guy who is that big slot type player. By the way, look at SMU's uniforms, man. Just so pretty. I mean, red, white, and blue in any combination is always going to be super solid, but there's something about that red belt, blue lettering, a blue number, red lettering. It just looks so clean. Anyway, getting back to it. 6'4", 233 pounds, kind of a carbon copy of that Black type of frame, exceptional receiving ability. He's a nuanced route runner with big, soft hands. Good physicality to beat the press in the slot. So that's something that I like to look out for as well, because yeah, sure, you could play in the slot, but can you beat that press on those smaller defensive backs that are those feisty, smaller defensive backs? And Maryland does it with relative ease. Great production on just 34 catches in 2023. I believe he had 520 yards and 8 touchdowns on just 34 catches. Speed and body control of a player with a much, much smaller frame. That's another thing I love. He just seems more of a natural pass catcher than anything else from the tight end position. And with Preston Stone geared up for a big time 2024 season, I fully expect RJ Maryland to be somewhere around that 750 yard, 10 touchdown mark this year. I fully expect him to make a name for himself in that offense. On the con side, I don't love his frame. Kind of the same thing with Knee Black. I want to see him fill out a little bit more. Wasn't particularly impressed with any of his tight end duties. Not a good blocker. Needs to work hard to generate any push on his assignment whatsoever. So play strength comes into question when having to be a blocker. So I think RJ Maryland is someone looking forward. He's going to be more of that big slot type of player, which is fine. That's perfectly fine. But I would like to see a little bit more, just a little bit more consistency as a blocker for anything. A crackback, not a crackback block. I'm sorry, a crack block. Crackback blocks are illegal. Don't want to see that. Like a crack block or something just off the line. But Maryland is someone that I'm not necessarily concerned with playing inline. I want to see him more in that big slot role. And moving into our top 10 here. At number 10, I have Bryson Nesbit from North Carolina. This is someone that I was enamored with last year throughout the process. Was fully convinced that he was going to come out in 2024, especially with a weak tight end class past Brock Bowers. I thought he had a real chance of going early on day 2. But he goes back and is, in my opinion, in the top 10. I think this is a little bit more of a deeper tight end class than it was last year, but it's not super deep to where he's going to fall completely out of the shuffle. But 6'5", 235 pounds, 21 years old, blurs the line completely between slot receiver and tight end. Fantastic receiving ability, smooth, soft hands, one of the faster, if not the fastest tight end in the entire class. Big, long legs with big strides. Uses his speed to create natural separation. He's a great nuanced route runner, and he's a great red zone target with a great frame and good leaping ability. On the con side, he's a non-factor as a pass blocker and a bad run blocker. A 38.0 grade in 157 run blocking snaps last season. A few concentration drops, and he needs to do better. He needs to do a better job against press in the slot. His play strength is really disappointing. 235 pounds. I just realized we hit a string of 3 straight tight ends that are 235 pounds or below. So not exactly what you want to see. These guys, I guess I would categorize as more of those big slot type of guys at the next level. These guys, I'm completely enamored with blocking ability because, back in the day, that's what tight ends used to do. It was more of a block first position. Now these guys are looked at as just big weapons across the middle of the field, and that's completely fine. But I would like to see a little bit more consistency as a blocker. I'd love to see Nesbit get a touch more weight on his frame, because when you watch his film, he looks so much smaller than his frame indicates. He looks like he's 6'5", 175 pounds, not 235. So I'd like to see him bulk up just a touch and get that play strength up. But he's a fantastic player that I thought could have went day 2, early day 3 last year. So I have him firmly in that day 2 conversation this year. At number 9, we have Luke Lackey here from Iowa. So tight end university, I would say. But this is exactly what I wrote. I'm going to read for you verbatim what I wrote as an evaluation, because unfortunately last year, he did break his leg early on in the 2023 season. So my 2024 evaluation on him is pending for the most part. Lackey is an all-around super solid tight end prospect from Tight End University in Iowa. If he would have stayed healthy in 2023, I believe he would have entered the draft and would have been a solid early day 2 prospect. Lackey has all the tools to be a great modern day all-around tight end in the NFL as long as he could stay healthy. That holds true. Good blocker, good receiver up the seam. He tracks the ball very well down the field. He reminds me a lot of Sam Laporta in some ways. I'm not going to say that he is Sam Laporta. Reminds me quite a bit of him, especially from a receiving aspect. But Lackey is someone that, as long as he could stay healthy, I think he's going to have a very, very solid career in the NFL. One thing to note, though, on the con side, he is coming off of a broken leg, and he will be 24 around the time of the NFL draft. So just something to note, but I think that he's going to be a super solid player, and as long as he could stay healthy this year, I think he will be firmly in the day 2 discussion when the NFL draft rolls around. Number 8, we have Oscar Delp here. Maybe a little bit lower than some other people have him. I've seen him all the way up at the top. My counterpart, J-Wack Gridiron, I believe, had him in the top 3. I just couldn't see it for the most part right now. To me, it's not a big enough sample size for the first couple of years of his career. And I know that he had Brock Bowers in front of him, and then 2 years ago he had Darnell Washington in front of him. I couldn't think of his name for a second, but Georgia is slowly but surely becoming a factory of tight end prospects. But Delp is got fantastic size, 6'5", 245 pounds. He's 20 years old. Fantastic size, athleticism combination for the position. Despite being a backup, he possesses experience in line and in the slot. He's a smooth route runner with great bursts off the line of scrimmage. It's good speed to power to overwhelm linebackers and be a threat up the seam. And he's got good sync at the top of his routes, good manipulation of defenders with sharp cutting ability to the left or the right. He's a good blocker, can get to the second level and be a real factor as well. Love all that from him. I just want to see it more consistently. I want to see it in a starting role in 2024. On the con side, he does struggle to get off the line of scrimmage versus press coverage, and he's got limited experience against the press. So in the small sample size that I did see out of the slot, against press coverage, he didn't do a great job. His play strength doesn't match his frame, and he's got a limited route tree. Doesn't do well in contested catch situations. While he can get to the next level as a blocker, he doesn't hold his blocks long and gets bullied around by bull rushers when he does play in line. So a lot to love about Delp's game, a lot not to like about Delp's game. I'm hoping with more consistent playing time this upcoming season, we'll be able to see him kind of put it all together and be that top 5 tight end prospect that a lot of people think he can be. At number 7, I have Jack Velling here, that transferred to Michigan State by way of Oregon State. He set the Oregon State record for touchdown catches in a season last year at 8, I believe it was, breaking Luke Musgrave's record. That's not to completely crap on that record, but that's not something that really I thought was overly impressive. 8, when I read that, I was like, oh wow, he must have had like 12, 13, 14 touchdown catches. 8, yeah, that's great. Don't get me wrong, 8 is great, but not saying that I can go out there and do it. But let's move on. Good size strength for the position. 6'5", 250 pounds, 21 years old, coming off of a great season. Effortless receiving ability. He might be the overall second or third best receiving tight end in the entire draft class. Strong hands can make difficult catches look easy, and he's really good in contested catch situations or catches in traffic. Good believability in his route running. Creates separation pretty easily. But on the con side, he wasn't asked to block a ton at Oregon State, but wasn't very good at it. Needs to improve greatly in that area. Some concentration drops last year, and needs to improve his route running to the right side of the field. A virtual non-factor that side of the field. That really does sound like nitpicking, and I'm sorry if that bothers you, but, teams, if I can see that, if someone that is, a schmuck with a microphone that's evaluating these players can see that he's a non-factor to the right side of the field. You don't think that these big universities can see that, especially now that he's playing at arguably a bigger university at Michigan State. So, he needs to improve to that area, especially the run blocking as well. Michigan State is not a team that's going to go out there and throw for 4,000, 4,500 yards a season. He needs to improve if he wants to play every single down. He needs to improve that area. But there's a lot to like from Velling's game, and he just misses out. Well, not just misses, but he just misses out on the top 5 at number 7. So moving on to number 6 here, we have Jake Brenningstool from Clemson. Very athletic, big-bodied frame, 6'6", but only 230 pounds. He is the lightest, or tied for the lightest tight end on this entire board. Extremely agile for the position. He's one of the more explosive tight ends in the 2025 class. Fantastic instincts and adjustability with the ball in the air. So that's something, body control is big for wide receivers. So it's even bigger when you could see that from a tight end, which, Tight ends are bigger. You're not parading around a 6'6", 250-pound X wide receiver on the outside, unless you're Calvin Johnson, but that's just a once in a generation freak of nature. But when you're able to see the fluidity, the agility, and the body control and contorting ability from a guy this size, 6'6", 230 pounds, it's very, very impressive. He could be a potential nightmare mismatch in the slot at the NFL level because he does possess that speed and overall agility. On the con side, his slender frame hampers his ability as a blocker. A 44.4 grade in 327 run blocking snaps in 2023. For an impressive receiving option, he does a lot of his damage in the intermediate. He can't really find the space to win up the seam. So again, I'm going to credit that to lack of play strength. If he can get a little bit more meat on that frame, maybe not something that's going to hamper. If he can get up to like 238, 240 pounds, he could still hold that agility and that, fluidity in his movements. I think he'll be fine. Jake Brennan-Stool is someone that just misses out on my top 5, but someone that I could easily see in the top 3 at the end of the season if he does put on a little bit of weight throughout the course of the season and the offseason, and he continues to have solid performances like he did last year. So something to watch out for sure, just missing out on my top 5. At number 5, I have Mitchell Evans here from Notre Dame. Now, if you look at this picture of Mitchell Evans, kind of looks a lot like Michael Mayer, and that's my first note on him. He's a less athletic version of Michael Mayer. Slightly less, though, not incredibly less. So that, to me, is a pro because Michael Mayer is someone that I also think is going to break out in a big way in 2024 for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's got fantastic hands. He could make and will make any catch in his catch radius, regardless of the traffic in front of him. He's uber focused in the pass game. I believe he had 56 or 58 targets in 2023, didn't drop a single pass. Love that. Despite his lack of speed, he's a good separator. So that's something that people don't understand. Right away, they think that if you create separation, you're fast. That's not true. It all comes down to, for tight ends and guys that are a little bit slower than those speedy slot receivers, it comes down to believability in your routes, your cutting ability, your agility. So Evans is someone that actually, for his size at 6'5", 251 pounds, has great believability in his route running. And he's a good pass blocker as well. So that's something that I like to see. On the con side, he's a little tight, a little clunky as an athlete. Like I mentioned before, he's a little bit of a less athletic version of Michael Mayer, and Michael Mayer wasn't the most outstanding athlete in the world. He does most of his damage inside of 10 yards from the line of scrimmage as a receiver. So on those in-breaking or out-breaking routes horizontally, he can get up the field for yards after the catch opportunities, but he's not someone that's going to win up the seam consistently. And he's not as good of a run blocker as he is a pass blocker. But Evans is someone that I think with another consistent season here, we're looking at a early day 2 prospect, maybe, the beginning of the 3rd round, I would say mid day 2, not early. Sorry. But yeah, someone that is super solid, and I'm excited to see what he can do in this 2024 season with a much improved Notre Dame offense around him, and with Riley Leonard throwing him the ball. Don't get me wrong, Sam Hartman was extremely handsome, but Riley Leonard's a way better quarterback. Moving on, number 4, we have Tyler Warren here from Penn State. One of the most outstanding qualities about Tyler Warren's game is that I read a scouting report from Theo Johnson last year, who went in the 4th round to the New York Giants this past draft. And they said that Tyler Warren is arguably the better pro prospect than Theo Johnson. And if you guys remember, Theo Johnson had a near perfect RAS score. He lit up the combine. So interesting to note. Tyler Warren, 6'6", 260 pounds, incredible size, extensive route tree for a tight end. Warren is extremely versatile. He's not someone that's going to play that big slot role, but he's someone that could really, really surprise you with his bag in terms of being a route runner. His technique is fantastic in all areas of his game. This is a player that really takes the time to perfect his craft, whether it be run blocking. His hand placement as a blocker is exceptional. His run blocking ability is arguably the best in the entire class, in my opinion. And he's very effective as a backup last year. He had 34 catches, and 7 of them went for touchdowns last year. So Drew Aller is getting back one of his primary targets for 2024. I fully expect him to break out in a bigger way as a receiver in 2024. I'm thinking maybe 50, 55 catches. This is also a team that boasts 2 top 25 running backs, so I doubt that we're going to see too much passing, but Tyler Warren's going to be someone that's super solid in the pass game. On the con side, from an athletic standpoint, I wouldn't say that he's the most fluid in the class. So if the scout says that Tyler Warren was the better overall prospect, Theo Johnson was definitely the better athlete out of the two. Only wins in the short to intermediate parts of the field. Like I said, he just doesn't really get up the field as a seam tight end. Lacks the speed to rely on to separate. He needs to work very hard to create space physically. So the way that I mean that is if the defender isn't pressed up against him, it's very difficult for him to win space. He's going to have to box out very aggressively in man coverage, but pressed up against him, he's fine because his play strength is unbelievable. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be a natural separator. And he's a good run blocker. He needs to improve as a pass blocker just a little bit in line, but that's something that I think with more reps as the first team tight end, I think he'll be fine. But Tyler Warren is an exceptional tight end prospect, and I'm very, very excited to see what he could do this year. Moving on to our top 3, I have Terrence Ferguson from Oregon here. Overall, I think Ferguson is the most well-rounded tight end in the entire class early on. Some of the best play strength for the position in the entire class. The physicality is nasty in blocking and receiving. He's got a nasty mentality to his game at all, every snap, and I love that. A really good athlete, and he's able to change direction and feint defenders at full speed. So he's someone that has that 6'5", 260-pound frame, but he's running at you as a Z or a X type of wide receiver with the cutting ability, with the feints, with the overall agility. It's a sight to see. He's a good blocker, especially as a pass blocker. Run blocking, he's good as well. Could show a little bit of improvement, but he showed insane body control and is able to make some excellent adjustments mid-route. So that's another thing that I love to see. Like I mentioned with Jake Brenningstool, that's such a rare thing to see from athletes this size that it has to be touched upon when seen. On the con side, he can be thrown off of his routes easily by strong defenders. So if you get up and you press him, more than likely you're going to be able to throw him off his route. He doesn't work back to the football as a receiver, so that leaves space for turnovers or pass breakups. And like I said, while he's a good enough blocker, he needs to kind of perfect his technique a little bit. There are times where he gets dragged around the field as a blocker, so could open up the door for some holding penalties here and there. But Ferguson overall, really solid tight end prospect. I have him in that round 2 range. I think that he could easily be at the back end of round 2 in this upcoming draft. So just missing out on our top spot here, maybe a surprise to some, but I have Harold Fannon Jr. from Bowling Green University. This guy had the most impressive tape of any tight end in this class that I watched. Overall, especially as a receiver, insane athletic ability for the position. Good size despite a little light, and his bridge is 6'4", 230 pounds. So like I mentioned before, with Brenningstool, Fannon Jr. is the other tight end that was tied for the lowest weight in the class at 230 pounds. The best vertical threat in the entire class, without a doubt. Sure-handed, credited with 0 drops on 57 targets last year. He's a menace in the open field. Virtually impossible to bring down one-on-one. He drags multiple defenders down the field with him in yards after the catch chances. He's not afraid to do the dirty work. He's a willing and able blocker in both areas as a run blocker and a pass blocker. On the con side, like I said, he's a little bit undersized, but I do believe that he could be this year's version of Brock Bowers. He's a little too inconsistent as a blocker. Would love to see him clean up his technique, and would love to see just a touch more physicality from him for the position. You're not always going to win with your natural athleticism and speed. I'd love to see him get his hands inside those 5 yards on the defender, throw that defender around a little bit. But Fannon Jr., it was tough between number 2 and number 1. There were just a couple very small instances that made me think maybe he's not ready to be the top tight end in this class yet. But man, he was really close. He's an unbelievable player. But for now, he's not as good as number 1. And that's got to be Coulson Loveland. A fantastic photo of him, by the way. Looks great. Look at that jawline. That's insane. Anyway, Coulson Loveland is my top tight end in the entire class, and the only tight end that I do believe has round 1 potential. Coming from Michigan, the best route runner in the entire class for the position, and it's not close. Elite agility and quickness off the line of scrimmage, great flexibility and change of direction in his routes and after the catch. He provides a big, strong target up the seam and is not afraid to get physical. And overall, he is a good pass blocker as well. So on the con side, I don't have many, but there are a few. Despite having extensive experience, he's not a great run blocker, especially for his size. So you would think with Michigan, throughout his time here with Blake Corum, with Donovan Edwards. I mean, Blake Corum a couple of years ago had like 327 attempts. You would think that he would be a better run blocker than he is, but he's not. He needs to clean up that area. And then the only other con I have for him is he needs to improve his hands overall. He had 5 drops in 2023. So that's far too many for my taste, especially since he's not going to be a high volume guy. Coulson Loveland's not going to be someone that gets 75 catches a season. He's going to be around that 35 to 50 range. So 5 drops, in my opinion, is just a tad too much. But I love what I've seen from his game, but it's very, very close. I want you guys to note it's very, very close between Harold Fannon Jr. and Coulson Loveland for that top spot. I have Fannon Jr. as maybe an early day 2 guy, early round 2, but Loveland is the only tight end in this class that I have that has a round 1 grade. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There is my top 20 tight ends for the 2025 NFL Draft, the preseason edition. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and let me know if you guys love these videos, please. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I see you in the next one.